Hello, welcome to the Aura Edit. I am your host, Danya Jimenez, and this is a new creative outlet for myself. It's 2025. Everyone's different, everything is different. And so I figured I just need another little outlet to share basically what vibes I'm moving through and what inputs I'm playing with. And one of the major themes that I'm focusing on this year is moving away from perfectionism. I've sort of made a career based on helping people like get it right, especially with like very public projects, whether that be producing podcasts or walking people through their PR strategy or creating brands out in the world. And this is more about play and how much power we can find in play when we sort of let go of that perfectionism. So if you've, paid attention to any of the other content I've made in the past, this is just going to be a little looser. It's going to be a little less hand holding. I think in the past, I've always tried to like reference, articles and this and that and give scientific data points, and this isn't going to be like that. This is going to be a lot more like, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm experiencing, this is what my internal landscape is like. And I think it's the right time for it. I think more and more people are waking up to focusing on their internal landscape, having this understanding that a lot of your presence and your power is in where you pay attention, and there's a lot to explore inside of you. So if you have the ability to kind of draw yourself inward, it's kind of limitless. There's a lot going on in there. So I think a good way to sort of start this is to talk about how I prep for recording, how I prepped for recording this podcast, and how this is sort of part and parcel of like when I work with people one-on-one as a creative coach, or intuitive coach for them. And I'll pause right there actually just to talk about that for a second. Is that like ground rule number one? I think that intuition and creativity are the same thing. They're the same thing. And I think that creativity is the like business word. It's the Harvard Business Review word. It's the thing we can monetize. It, they're the same thing. And in, that intuitive hit, that intuitive energy that comes to you, is the same as like creative energy. They're the same thing. And even the way that we produce things and the way that we exist in the world, I'm not saying that we need to only tap into our intuition, that we need to like live in this like liminal space that has nothing to do with reality. I think that our intuition guides us through reality and helps us create, obviously, because it is creativity, it's the same thing, helps us to create things in this material world. But I think there's also data in this external environment, and it's the melding of those two that create the best outcomes, right? Um, so part and parcel, I think those two things are the same thing. When I work with somebody creatively one-on-one, or as I prepped for this podcast, what I do is I sit down, I meditate, and I envision my whole body being filled with light. I just envision my body being filled with light. And then I envision that light moving down my chakra system. If you're not familiar with the chakras, fine, Google it. And moving kind of down through, down my spine into the core of the earth. So I'm grounded, like I am visualizing a grounding sensation. And then that I see that light moving back up from the core of the earth through my chakras, through the base of my spine, up through the crown of my head and out. And then I see it plugging into a grid of divine light energy. And I imagine that all creativity, all ideas, everything that we are destined to create, that we want to create, we're pulling it from that energy. Everything that has ever existed or will ever exist, that energy already exists. And so I think we're just like we're pulling from that collective consciousness. And so I will often just like sit in that I sometimes will ask a question. And today I asked, like, what should I talk about on this podcast? And I just heard very clear, very simple, just talk about what you're curious about. And so that's what we're going to do. We're just going to talk about like what it is that I'm exploring with, playing with. So kind of one of the pieces that I'm really, really interested in and will recommend to anyone, and is kind of the thing I can't stop thinking about, are the telepathy tapes. If you're not aware what the telepathy tapes are, it is a documentary style podcast produced by Kai Dickens, I believe is her name. And essentially, she has met with families and their children with autism. They're called spellers, but they're nonverbal or very limitedly verbal, um, and it explores the probability, I believe, after listening, that these kids are psychic, that they have telepathy, that um, communicating the way that most of us do is very difficult for them, but that they have found other ways to communicate and share energy with one another. And I find it fascinating. I highly recommend it to anyone to give that a listen. I cannot stop thinking about it. The other thing that I've done, I have transitioned from Goodreads. Goodreads, if you don't know what it is, it's a platform where you can set reading challenges and rate all the books you read. And I think some of the authors are on there, so you can kind of interact with them. You can have friends and people can follow your journey. It's owned by Amazon, has been for a few years. And I think Jeff Bezos has enough of my personal data. So I moved to, it's called Storygraph. It's owned and operated by I believe, one person. And it gives you different stats, which is cool. Uh, it basically like reads the tone of the books. And I don't know, I'm just like a nerd. So I like to figure out like, oh, I'm reading more nonfiction than fiction. And little silly things like that. Anyways, I'm reading The Power by Noami Alderman, originally published in fall of 2016. And I just feel like there's a lot of themes that are reemerging that were really prominent at that time. And The Power is basically an exploration, it's fiction, of teenage girls all over the world are waking up to the fact that they can control electricity. They have an electrical current running through their body, which we all do, but they can control it, and they can use it to control and hurt other people. And so listening to that, and I think, this probably started this genre. There was a book a couple years ago called When Women Were Dragons, sort of a similar theme of discovering an internal power. And I think that often we equate power in our modern day with like brute force, brute strength, because that's how we see it weaponized or mechanized most often. But I think it's so much more than that. And a new thing that I'm trying, and not to take a dig at finding your joy, because I think that's super important. I think that the frequency at which we vibrate is very determined by the inputs that we're feeding ourselves. And so I think joy is obviously very important. We don't want to falsify our experience of reality and pretend that we're happy. But when we are sort of in a lower kind of despair loop, our neural pathways can just be like, it's never going to get better. It's going to be the same forever, which is like patently false. So sometimes you have to like pull yourself out of that. You have to kind of raise your vibration, and that's where it's very useful. And I've shared this in the past, to have a list of like, what are little things that bring you joy? Oh, is it going for a walk? Is it petting your pet? Is it literally sitting in the sunshine for 5 minutes? Because sometimes it's just that. Is it having a glass of water, or, getting a coffee from your favorite coffee place? Very like simple little things that help kind of shift the energy that you're experiencing. And while joy is really important, I'm trying that with power. I'm trying to create basically a list and notice, what are the things that make me feel powerful? What are the things that make me feel focused and unstoppable in moving towards the reality that I want to create, the world that I want to live in? What makes me feel like I am capable of generating that, of making that happen? I'm making sure I do those things as often as possible, right? So yeah, that's something I'm exploring with. And I have found like this internal focus is really important for feeling powerful in my own body. Physical movement is obviously very important. Um, and I think another piece that I'm exploring or playing with this year is consciously toggling between the me and the we. Consciously toggling between the identity of Danya, who Danya is, the ego, right? Like who I am, versus dispersing myself into the collective consciousness. And so, when I go to sleep at night, I try to create like an environment of sensory deprivation. I have, obviously blackout curtains, and I sleep with an eye mask, and I listen to brown noise, and I really just try to create you know, an environment in which I can immerse myself in the dreamscape. I think that dreams are obviously a very rich area of exploration in psychology, but it's hard to do because I can't prove that what happened in my dream, was significant, and you can't prove that what happened in yours was, but it colors our experience of being human quite a bit. It's about a third of your life. So if you can explore that, I think there's just a lot of creativity, intuition to be found there. And it's quite fun, I think, exploring your dream world. So before I go to sleep, I am consciously in this. I've been doing this for maybe like 3 weeks now. I consciously think to myself the word melt, melt, melt. And, I think one reason is definitely I'm trying to move with my very limited understanding of quantum physics. I'm trying to move from being the particle, being the observed particle, to being the wave, right? And that's what they say is like atoms are, when it's a particle, that it's being observed. And otherwise, that energy is loose and can exist across time and space. And so I'm trying to move from being the particle, from being Danya, from being these atoms that are together here, to being absorbed into the collective consciousness. And if you're like, whoa, that's too much, it's gonna all be like that. This is what this podcast is gonna be. It's gonna be me like following that feeling, following that internal conversation that I'm having with myself, and just sort of reading into those vibes and sharing them as they come. So if you liked this episode, my aim is to, I don't know, put out 2 to 3 a week. I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver, but I think I can just pop off on, 15-minute to 20-minute episodes and share what I'm vibing with, what I'm exploring, what themes I'm playing with, what's turning up. There's going to be, I am me. So there's going to be pop culture, there's going to be astrology, there's going to be numerology, there's going to be all of these things. And just a little note on that is like, there is an overwhelming amount of Aquarian energy. Pluto moved into Aquarius. It's going to be there for 20 years. The sun it's Aquarius season. The sun is in Aquarius. The nodes are in Pisces and Virgo, but they will move into Aquarius and Leo in about 18 months. There's just a lot of experimental energy, but also innovative energy. It's about rolling the dice on behalf of humanity. And that's why I'm so focused on what are the things that make me feel powerful, because I am undeterred in the vision that I see for the world. Am I can just see it. I can see it so very clearly. And so I'm going to do everything within my power to make sure that we get there. I want to continue to, yes, this will be about my internal landscape, but I want to continue to create a space where I can interview other creatives about how they're experiencing reality right now, and what inputs they're really tuned into from a culture perspective, and what they're intuiting about what comes next. I love having those conversations with folks. So, there's the door is definitely wide open on that. And yeah, let's continue to play. Let's continue to see where this unfolds and how this unfolds. I will make an email if you want to ask questions, but otherwise, shoot me a DM on Instagram, on TikTok, for however long that lasts. And yeah, let's keep the conversation flowing. I really just envision this space as an opportunity to talk about consciousness, culture, creativity, for those of us who are chronically online. So I'll see you on the next episode. Thanks so much.